James Mangold's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has now come and gone. Thank you to everyone who put up with me talking about one of my other favorite franchises for a week or so, but while Indy is over, Star Wars fans are just getting started with James Mangold. At Star Wars Celebration, we learned that he will be directing a movie about the discovery of the Force and the dawn of the Jedi. I've been on a Mangold kick myself, watching some of his movies I've missed over the years and rewatching some I remember liking, and of course I just saw the Dial of Destiny, so today I want to talk about his films, what they have in common, and why I think his sensibilities as a storyteller could make for an awesome Star Wars film. It makes sense to start the conversation with Indiana Jones. I'm not going to dive into a full-on review because I already did that a week or so ago. If you want to hear my thoughts, I'll link to the video in the cards. But the short version is that I liked it, I didn't love it. I thought it was well made, and in my opinion, pulled off a pretty bonkers third act that easily could have gone off the rails. Obviously, everyone is going to have a different opinion there. But what isn't an opinion is that the movie didn't have a strong first week at the box office. It's been 15 years since Indiana Jones was last in theaters. While that franchise certainly has its diehard fans, it's not anywhere close to the level of something like Star Wars. The response I've seen since its official release date has been more positive, but it originally opened to lackluster reviews, which I'm sure didn't help, and it just seems like people in general are far more picky about what they go to see in theaters. I used to go to every Marvel movie opening weekend, but I have been far less motivated as of late. Happy to wait to watch Ant-Man 3 on a plane. I'm just gonna wait for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 to come out on Disney+. I'm just saying I'm not all that surprised about Dial's box office reception. I usually don't talk about box office numbers because I am far from an expert there, but in this case I think I have to bring it up because, let's face it, Lucasfilm has a rough track record of announcing films and projects that just fade away. People have been asking me if James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi film could be in danger of that same fate, and it's a valid question. I have to admit that given the last 4 or 5 years, I am preparing myself for the possibility of disappointment. I don't know if I'll fully believe a new Star Wars movie is happening until my butt is in the seat, or at least I see a trailer. But I am optimistic about this latest slate of announcements, and I really hope Mangold gets to make a Star Wars movie because I think he is a great filmmaker, and having watched several of his movies, I think his philosophies mesh well with the ideas George Lucas made central to Star Wars. Mangold has proven he is a good collaborator with Lucasfilm, and it sounds like both parties actively want to work together again. Compare that to, say, Colin Trevorrow, whose movies I don't personally enjoy, and the ideas he presented in his script for Episode 9 are straight up antithetical to what Lucas said about the Force. There's a scene where Yoda and Luke applaud Rey for embracing both the light and dark side of the Force, and Lucas has made it very clear that is not what balance in the Force means. I think those kinds of creative differences are what led to Trevorrow's departure more so than bad reviews on his movie The Book of Henry. We also need to take into account Dial of Destiny's massive $300 million budget. I think it's completely reasonable that a Star Wars movie set 25,000 years before the prequels could have a much smaller budget. I even think that would be the smart move. Again, I'm no box office expert, but a story like that could be smaller and more personal and wouldn't be as financially risky. So yeah, for now, I'm gonna assume Mangold is still on board and will be writing away whenever the writer's strike ends. He basically said as much on the podcast Happy Sad Confused with Josh Horowitz. He also said something else that gave me great confidence, because this is a big potential story. The discovery of the Force and the advent of the Jedi, that's a big deal that I think will be loaded with philosophy. On that same podcast, Mangold says he hasn't met with Lucas yet because of the writer's strike, but that he looks forward to talking it over with him, which is great. This is the kind of story I think should absolutely be passed by the maker. But I think there is also room for flexibility because the Jedi won't exist at the start. I think there will be lots of discussions of what is the Force, how do we connect with it, and what is the proper way to use it. I think we can see a lot of different interpretations that are decidedly not Jedi, but that's okay because everyone is figuring it out. We might see some people attempting to embrace both the light and the dark, and we can see why that just doesn't work for the Jedi philosophy. As I was going through some of Mangold's filmography, I kept seeing some of the same character archetypes and themes pop up, and I couldn't help but think about how they might apply to a story about the discovery of the Force. So often, you'll find two characters who become unlikely friends, or they're a bit of an odd couple. One is a little bit darker and one is a little bit lighter, but they almost always find find a way to find common ground. Dial of Destiny has Indy team up with Helena Shaw, who is very much like Indy was in Temple of Doom, out for herself, fortune, and glory. They begrudgingly work together and learn to help one another. Helena becomes less selfish, and Indy stops acting like a shell of his former self. 3:10 to Yuma is probably my favorite Mangold movie, and it's all about a humble rancher who stays true to his word and his character in the face of insurmountable odds so he can deliver an outlaw to a prison train. And over the course of the story, the two characters find some level of respect and even friendship, to the point where the outlaw tries to help the rancher get himself to prison. And the rancher's son is along for the ride, and at first he sees the outlaw and clearly respects the power he has through violence, but eventually comes to respect the strength of character of his father and everything he stands for. It's so good. Or you've got Girl Interrupted, where we see Winona Ryder is in a mental institution and she meets Angelina Jolie, who won an Oscar for her performance, but her character is the rebel, standing up to the people she views as oppressive, and she's not completely wrong, but she's also not completely right, and we see her trying to drag Winona's character down, actively standing in the way of her health and recovery. It's this dysfunctional friendship that gets very dark, but eventually does heal. In Logan, Wolverine literally has to face a dark and evil version of himself while he fights to protect the next generation, an unlikely friendship he forges with Laura. In Ford v Ferrari, Christian Bale has anger issues that get in the way of his racing career, and he is resistant to help from his friend played by Matt Damon. They butt heads a lot, but they ultimately love one another. That movie has this great fist fight in it where they're fighting among spilled groceries, and Matt Damon picks up a can to hit Christian, but then swaps it out for a loaf of bread instead because they don't actually want to hurt one another. The unlikely friendships are probably my favorite recurring aspects of Mangold's films, and it got me thinking about how that might appear in his Dawn of the Jedi movie. He has said he wants to make it like a biblical epic, similar to the Ten Commandments, which, by the way, has a central relationship between Moses and Ramses, who were basically raised as brothers, and then fail to find common ground and their relationship falls apart. That idea excites me to see in Star Wars, because yes, I think the discovery of the Force will have to be a philosophical movie, but you can still ground it in humanity with two characters like that. Two people who were maybe brought together by the Force, grow close as they try to understand it and wield it together, and then potentially fall apart again as they realize their philosophies are in opposition. That's a deep and personal conflict, and it could lead to a fight where the stakes are huge for the galaxy and for just two people who love one another. Hell, we could even make it a romantic relationship, and the fact that it falls apart could lead to the Jedi philosophy of avoiding attachments. We already know about the Prime Jedi, but we don't know if that is a literal or metaphorical figure. What if we find out it was in fact two people, one light and one dark, and the movie we see will be about what it actually means to find balance between the two? Obviously, I have no idea what'll happen, and I think this movie is years and years away, but I had a lot of fun going through just some of James Mangold's movies and exploring what he seems to think is important and interesting in storytelling. I will also point out that he has worked with several actors on multiple occasions. I tend to like my Star Wars actors to be lesser known, so I'm not sure if I'm ready for Christian Bale, Matt Damon, or Hugh Jackman to take the lead in a Star Wars film, but I do think Boyd Holbrook or Ben Foster would be great. Anyway, this is all completely speculative and just a bit of fun based on only a handful of his movies, but I think Mangold at the helm of a film about the Dawn of the Jedi sounds very promising. What do you think? What do you hope to see in that story? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.